I was in a change room with Shane Smeltz, Jason Chalina, Michael Thwaite. So you're around some really good individuals, and it was a good apprenticeship. And I've seen it with plenty of really good players from the NPL not be able to make the step up to the A-League just purely off pressure, not because of their ability, purely off the fact that they just can't deal with the lights in the stadium and the increased kind of aura around the game. You really build up this strong sense of resiliency and self-worth and self-character. And for me, I got to a point where nothing could really shake me because I believed so much in the process.
And welcome back to another episode of the How to Become podcast. We're your hosts, Harvey Rivers and Adam Powell.
Now, today's one we're particularly excited about. We're joined by ex-professional footballer and current Chief Operating Officer at Brisbane Roar, Zac Anderson.
Thanks, lads. I appreciate the opportunity to jump on. We'll dive into it and have a bit of fun.
Yeah, that's it. We're especially thankful that in our first episode a few weeks ago, we said about our failed football career. So we actually got a proper professional footballer has joined us.
You found another failed footballer.
Oh, shit.
You're recruiting well, actually.
Yeah, I love it.
I think one thing I'm particularly excited about this one is we were a very short career, right? But we have a shitload of funny stories from a 2, 3, 4 year career, right? Now, you're in the game a lot longer, so I'm expecting your list to be a lot longer too.
There's a few funny stories, yeah. It depends how long we've got. And I guess
is that another episode?
Podcast, yeah. And if you want to actually get onto the podcast store, you might want to be careful. But yeah, no, that's the beautiful thing about the game, right? You meet some amazing people. You have some amazing stories to share, and like we were just mentioning off air, the change room is a special place. So yeah, there's plenty of things we can dive into.
Yeah, can't wait, mate. But take us back to the start, because you're a sunny coast lad by nature, but you ended up on the Gold Coast as your first professional club.
Yeah, I did. Grew up on the Sunshine Coast, born and raised in Caloundra. Ended up going to boarding school in Brisbane because I got to that point where football was taking over, and mum and dad were both school teachers. Couldn't drive me from the coast to Brisbane every day, so made the move to Brisbane. Went to BBC, did 2 years at BBC, and that was really where I started to get serious about the game. Decided that I wanted to give it a crack. At the end of the day, the game is very subjective, right? So you really, when I speak to parents and players, you really just need a coach to like you. You don't need everyone to like you. You just need a coach.
So true.
And I had a coach that just took an interest in me, and luckily enough, he became the Gold Coast United youth team coach, Mike Mulvey, who was also a premiership winning coach at Brisbane Roar a few years later. But got my opportunity just after school to sign for Gold Coast United, and my career went from there.
What a club to start at as well. You're saying then you played at the Seabus. Played at the Seabus, trained at TSS, 25 degrees in the middle of winter. You must have thought this is me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, you can get quite comfortable, can't you? It's probably the worst club to start at because you're going into an environment like you said, you're training on the water there. I was in a change room with Shane Smeltz, Jason Chalina, Michael Thwaite. So you're around some really good individuals, and it was a good apprenticeship. Something that I think about a lot at the moment with the new crop, the new generation that's coming through. With any trade or any new career, you want to learn from the best, and I got an opportunity in those early years to really be mentored by some amazing people. Making my debut at Hindmarsh, I got dragged after 65 minutes, which wasn't great.
Stinker?
Yeah. I don't know if it was exactly a stinker, but it wasn't my best game, right? Like it's your debut at Adelaide. Yeah. You feel like everyone's on top of you. But played holding midfield that day, and it wasn't my greatest appearance. But just going out there and having the opportunity, right, that every young athlete, young footballer would want, which is to play some professional minutes in a boutique football stadium. So yeah, Gold Coast United was some great years. Really enjoyed my opportunity there, and it was it kind of led a great foundation and platform for the years to come.
Yeah, it's awesome, and we were so lucky to taste it for a couple of years back in England. And as you said, so many kids dream of it growing up. Absolutely. So to go and experience it, even for just a season, was incredible. But what does the pathway look like in Australia? Because from what I can see, it's quite different to the pathway you go through in England. Yeah,
it's been on a bit of a journey, and now that I'm in this role, I feel a real sense of responsibility, accountability to to help the young Queensland players, young boys and girls, get an opportunity if they want it, if they're ambitious enough to go and play at an elite level. When I was coming through, there was the Queensland Academy of Sport. So that was the pinnacle, the elite. And I look back at that squad at the time, the majority of those players ended up becoming professionals. And you lads have been in change rooms, right? The old mantra, your coach will say, well, one person in this change room is going to make it. Well, it's funny because in that time, in those days, the majority of those players were getting through. So I think back to those years, and I think they were doing something right. So, if I fast forward and I think about today, we're really just trying to connect the local game with the elite game. And from a Brisbane Roar perspective, which is where I sit now, we are no bigger or better than any other local club. We just have a license to play in the professional game. So we have a real responsibility to be able to connect the pathway and give young boys and girls an opportunity.
I love that because it's definitely a momentum shift. I've been in the country 10 years now, and when I first came over, football or soccer was down a few pegs.
Yeah.
I think the Matildas have been great. The Socceroos doing well in the World Cups have been awesome for the profile.
Yeah.
And it seems like the new structure they've got in Queensland at least provides that pathway. If you're at QPL 3 this year and you think you're too good for that league, you can move up through the ranks.
Yeah.
So I think it's important at the top that they've kind of got that structure in place. How do you find the quality these days compared to when you were coming through, or is it really apples and oranges?
Man, honestly, I feel like the quality's there. I think there's a real perception at the moment in maybe this year or the years just gone that it hasn't quite been there. But I can honestly, hand on heart, tell you that from what I see, my subjective opinion is that it's just as good, if not better, than what it was when I played. I think that the thing now is that Football Australia have done an amazing job with the Matildas, right? They've really built an incredible brand, and they've really connected that national team with young Australians, both on the men and the women's side. So there's a real love for that brand, which has kind of elevated, the women's game, which has created a real perception around trying to get more younger players from the boys and the girls side to actually want to have that ambition to play either for the Matildas or for the Socceroos. So I guess if I relate that back to my business and I think about our brand, there's a real lesson there. And the lesson is the connection to community, the storytelling element, the ability for our kind of marquee players, which is our first teams, to really connect with the younger generation, which is, in my opinion, what the Matildas have done really well over the last few years.
Yeah, awesome. I love what you said about now it's pushing a lot more young people through to play the game. And it was something I was going to ask you. In Australia, there's so many different sports. In England, it's like you want to be a footballer and that's it. Did you ever get dragged down the path of an AFL or a rugby league, for example?
Yeah, I think it's natural for Aussies, right?
Yeah.
I think
and you're a big unit as well.
Yeah. He's massive, by the way.
I definitely got dragged in a couple of different directions, but I think it actually helps us as athletes. I think Australians are known for our physicality. Coming from the UK, you're born with a football at your foot, right? Where I'm got a tennis racket in my hand, I'm kicking a footy, I'm running, I'm swimming. So I think it helps us from an athletic profile perspective, and I think that you saw that with our golden generation. They were just beasts of athletes, right? And they were playing in the Premier League, the ones that were technically there. However, I think that for me, when I think about my journey, could I focus a little bit more on football earlier? It may have helped, but also I just loved playing tennis and I loved swimming, and the fortunate or unfortunate thing about Australia is that we have options. Like we have weather,
so many options.
Right? We have the beach, we have
surf.
We have everything, right? Where I think for yourselves, growing up in the UK, it's probably a little colder. You're probably inside a lot more. So I think that as Australians, we're just spoiled, and we're spoiled for choice. We're spoiled for options of we want to go for a surf today, or we want to kick a footy. So I think that if I look back, wouldn't say I would necessarily change it, but I think it's an interesting debate whether it helps you or hinders you.
So Gold Coast United, did you leave before the club went down, or was that the reason you left?
It was the reason I left. Yeah, so I was there from the start to the finish, 3 years.
What happened there?
And in the end, our owner Clive Palmer lost his license.
Okay.
And so I've had many conversations with many people about that story, and it was just an amazing 3 years, but one that kind of ended quite abruptly, really. And it was sad because there was a lot of really, really good players that were coming through at that time, which just didn't get the opportunity because of the fact they just didn't get enough minutes to show themselves, right? And I was very, very fortunate. It's a story about life, really. you get an opportunity, and you're in the right place at the right time in front of the right coaches, and then you get the next one, and then you hope that you do the right things to get the next contract. And so, I remember playing with plenty of really good players that just didn't get enough game time, right? And so they just didn't get that next gig, and then they find themselves either falling back a rung to then try and propel their career. But from a Gold Coast perspective, I signed as a youth player day one. I was involved in the first team, making my debut at 18. I ended up signing my first professional deal on the last year that the club folded. And the fortunate thing was, because of the fact the club was folding, I got opportunity. So there's both sides of the story there. And because I got opportunity, I ended up playing for the Australian under-23s. I played down at that time it was Central Coast Stadium in front of Graham Arnold and Vidmar, who then selected me for the Australian under-23s, which I played against Iraq, and was fortunate enough to impress Arnie and Vidi. And Arnie was Mariners coach at the time, which then got a phone call the next day, said, Gold Coast is no longer. What are your thoughts on coming to the Mariners? And that was the next step. So just an interesting kind of sequence of events.
Yeah, which is, by the way, the most picturesque stadium, I think, potentially in world football. It's incredible.
Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
Did you have many other people knocking on the door, or it was that was kind of your only option and you just went straight away?
Mate, I think it was fortunate at that time that my head was, I was a little bit kind of caught out, right? I think I was 20, 21 at the time. I've just come off my first professional year, so focused on just, like we said, pre-recording, like being a professional footballer, like I could have, money's great, but at that time when you're 20, 21, you don't need much, right? So just to go and play every day around good players and feel like you're developing is all you really want. So to get that call from Arnie, someone that I really respected, and get the opportunity to go down to Terrigal and then be, I guess, thrown into a completely different change room, a change room that had just lost a grand final to the Brisbane Roar, an environment that had some incredible leaders and coached by now the Socceroos coach, was just a whole nother kind of, I guess, experience for me at a very young age. But yeah, that from going from Gold Coast to going to Marin, it was like going from a youth team to a first team, because by the end of Gold Coast, it was just really a couple of us that were kind of came through the youth team that were left.
So what about the mental strength for that? Because it's a big environment. You're going out of Queensland, moving to a new club, new city, potentially away from family and friends. Not a very intimidating place. Changing rooms, they're not for the faint-hearted, right? At the end of the day, you're in there to take someone else's shirt, which is going to give them less money, potentially pay less on their mortgage or feed their kids.
Right.
So it's brutal. Yeah. So what was your mental state walking into that changing room and going, okay, I'm here now, I'm going to establish myself?
Yeah, ignorance is bliss, right? Like when you're young, you just don't think about it too much.
Yeah.
But it's funny because, in hindsight, you sit here now and we're having a chat about it and you think, wow, like I really was stepping into like an Alex Wilkinson's shoes at the time who was going to Korea. And if I thought about it,
it shits yourself.
Then you sit there and you're going, wow, like there's a little bit too much pressure there, because you just can't replace someone like that. But I think that the thing that really helped me was leaving home young. I left home at 15, which for some isn't young, but for me, being a bit of a mummy's boy, living on the Sunshine Coast, having everything done for me, going to boarding school and then having a little bit of hardening up, you'd say, and then being involved in change rooms, professional change rooms for the first time, like I said, around guys like Michael Thwaite and Jace Chelina and Smeltzy, gave me a good apprenticeship for 3 years to prepare myself to move down as a 21-year-old by myself. It was funny because I actually ended up moving in with Brent Griffiths, who was another centre half. So we literally signed and we got put into this hotel room and we're both centre halves, and people go like, how did you guys get along? And we were like, well, again, like didn't think about it. Like we were just young blokes who got put in I just needed a combination. Yeah. So I'm thinking, let's get in the car together, let's get the training. All right, I'm going to kick the shit out of you all that, at training, but then we'll come home, we'll cook dinner together, and so like you didn't think about it too much, right? You just wanted to train and put your best foot forward. But then as the years go on and you start to learn more about yourself and your ambition and what you want to do with your career, then obviously you start to think a little bit more deeply about what you want from your career, etc. But yeah, the change room at Mariners was something completely else. I've taken it through my whole career. It was just, it really came down to the people that were recruited, and it's something that I've really tried to bring to this football club over the last kind of 12 months.
Yeah, awesome. And do you remember back then, as such a young lad in that environment, how you dealt with the pressure of the environment? Because I look at now even the recent European Championships, you've got Kobbie Mainoo, who was 18 years old and at the start of the year was playing in the youth team, and all of a sudden he's pulling on an England shirt in the Euros final. And I just think, at 18, I was a kid. Yeah. I'm like, how the bloody hell?
You are a kid. And he's a kid as well.
How are they dealing with this?
Yeah, well, okay, first and foremost, you've got to have good people around you, right? Because we've all seen, it doesn't matter if you're 17 or 28, if you don't have good people around you that can really ground you and give you humility, then you're going to struggle. I think that for someone like him who's been able to step up and take on that responsibility of the England shirt, which you both know is a huge responsibility at such a young age, like there's definitely an element of it he actually doesn't understand really what's going on.
It's an interesting perspective.
I honestly feel like he's just probably playing on instinct and just going out there, and hopefully he's not thinking about it too much, because what I've seen is the more you think about things, if it's wow, how big's the stadium, how many people here, where's mum, then that's when the brain, and I've seen it with plenty of really good players from the NPL not be able to make the step up to the A-League just purely off pressure, not because of their ability, purely off the fact that they just can't deal with the lights in the stadium and the increased kind of aura around the game. So for someone as young as 18, now it's funny because in my role, speaking with younger players, speaking with parents, that players come in and their parents will say, my boy, and it's like, well, your boy is 17 and maybe young in your family at school, but actually in our environment, he's a young man. Yeah. And he needs to be a young man. He needs to learn very, very quickly that this game will chew you up and spit you out if you are complacent and you're not willing to take your opportunity. So for someone as young as 18, it's just really perspective how you see it, hey? Yeah,
I remember when, looking back to when we were 16, 17, we were at Cheltenham Town, which is like a League Two club in England, and they farm you straight out on loan. Yeah. So it's like all of a sudden you're playing non-league football on a Tuesday night. Yeah. I'm 16, goalkeeper, and you've got some 28-year-old bloke who's 16 stone. Lips, he's bold and he's got crosses coming in, and you're trying to take him as a goalkeeper, and he's just thinking, I'm going to smash you every single time.
They sniff you out, right? And this is the other thing. They absolutely sniff you out. And it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the beautiful thing or not about football is that you can be amazing. You can be great at 15. Like age is no barrier. At the end of the day, if you're good enough, you're old enough. That's the way that we see it at this club, but also it's the way the sport sees it. Once you get to a certain standard, people stop talking about your age. They just talk to you about the individual that you are. So it's funny though, at the end of the day, when you're 16, you still haven't really developed into a man that you are today, right? So
Jesus, no.
People still sniff you out.
Yeah, 100%.
One of the sad things for me came where I'd be playing, QBL Warner, whatever it is. I see another young lad on the other team, and I'd be that old, washed-up fella trying to hurt the little kid. I go, this is...
Have the tables turn.
I need to call it down.
I think I've heard you say, stick it on the keeper. He's shit 100%, before.
100%. Just put it right in his head.
Yeah, that's it. So then, Mariners, great experience there as a club as a whole. Yep. Where did you go on to that?
Mariners, I then moved to Sydney FC. Again, Arnie moved from Mariners to Sydney. Yeah, great. And again, like I said at the start of this pod, you just need one coach to back you. And, I had a decade-long career, but really had probably two coaches my whole career that really backed me. So it's a nice story in that. And I tell that a lot to younger players because there's a lot of subjectivity around the game. A lot of players that lose interest because a coach or a club decides to go in a different direction. But I went from Mariners to Sydney. I had a year at Sydney. And at that point, I was just in that, I guess, that 23, 24-year-old career mode where I was like, right, where's my career going? Am I going to be an A-League player for the next, let's call it 6-7 years? Or do I really want to go overseas and have an opportunity? So Sydney, for me, was an opportunity to play Asian Champions League. And that gave me, a platform being 6'4", and someone who I knew exactly my lane and my skill sets. So I was never going to be, Trent Sainsbury on the ball, Mitchell Duke in terms of his aerial ability, but I knew that I could forge a career in Asia, and very thankful to the likes of Sasha Ovanovsky and Michael Thwaite and the big centre halves that paved that way before me to give us an opportunity to go down that road, and so from Mariners to Sydney, had a year at Sydney, and then got my first opportunity to go to the Emirates, which was great.
And was that as out there as it sounds? Like now, from being in England, going to the Middle East to go and play football sounds outrageous.
Have you been in the Middle East?
No.
Dubai for a couple of days on the way over to Australia.
Stopover, right?
Yeah.
This is the thing. I didn't know anything about it. Being Aussie, being from the UK, you probably know Dubai more as a bit of a transit, stopover, right? Where
Instagram holiday destination nowadays, I think.
Where for Aussies, we'd go through Singapore, right? So I never thought of Dubai, but I had agents in my ear saying, Zac, let's stay on the course for Europe. But, I didn't have a European passport. And I was never going to play for Socceroos. So I having, I guess, some sensibility around like my level and understanding a little bit about myself and where I think I could get to myself too. I decided to take that next step to Dubai, spending a year in Dubai, which was great. For me, from a cultural, from a networking, it probably wasn't my best year in terms of football. First year abroad, understanding the pressure of being a foreigner. But for me, it was really, really important to just embrace, a completely different side of the world, start to understand, how they lived. I actually landed during Ramadan. So I literally landed. It was 50 degrees. There's no one around. I'm like, where is everyone? And it's because everyone's fasting, right? Everyone's at home, just staying out of the sun, just trying to get through till sundown, so then they could eat. And then they all nocturnal, right? So they would go out at night time, and I'd be getting calls like 1 a.m. saying, "Come on, Zachy, let's go for a tea." I'm like, I'm in bed. I'm not Muslim, so I actually can eat, but I'll be respectful of the fact you can't. But I absolutely will, because I don't follow your religion. But yeah, it was an amazing experience, and landing during Ramadan just completely, it was just like a whole different thing being 24. But yeah, that year was a big year in terms of my own personal growth.
I really want to know what the change room was like, and before I let you answer it, a memory's popped into my head of what happened.
I know what he's going to say.
And I thought this could never happen over there. So Christmas tradition, when we were youth team players, the first teamers would kind of go, we'll get the youth teamers to do something. This year, you get a message from one of the gaffers or something saying, all right, lads, you need to get a pair of bra knickers, pair of lingerie from your missus, your mum, your sister, whatever you've got. Brilliant. And you've got to sing the first team lads a song. So we're up there, it's the middle of winter in England, stood on a bench, 2 rows, you've got lads dressed out in frilly, like silky numbers, belting out Christmas carols.
Brilliant.
I'm thinking,
this wouldn't happen.
You probably couldn't do that during Ramadan. So what was the environment like? Was it good fun? Was it brutal? Was it a bit more
bit of both.
Respectful?
Yeah, a bit of both, to be fair. The local lads were amazing, but again, a completely different level of wealth, right? So we go back to the conversation around like earning your spot, going through your apprenticeship. There's 18-year-olds rocking up in Enzo Ferraris, and I'm looking around just going like, what's going on here? Like I'm not from this world, right? So yeah, I think the change room, it was very respectful. Obviously, you've got different cultures. I was one foreigner with another Brazilian, with another Tunisian. So, we kind of hung out together. But I had 2 or 3 of the local guys who really looked after me. But definitely very different to an Aussie change room, very different to an English change room. Very much focused on performance, and their the way that they would enjoy they would maybe go and smoke a shisha, or go back to one of the lads' places and have a barbecue, and like Dubai's a bit of a crazy place. Like you go back to some of the lads' places, they've got like monkeys flying around, and like you've seen it in Instagram posts, etc. So it's pretty cool, but very different. Yeah, very different to a change room at TSS. Yeah, no bras and knickers, eh? Just the dish dash, like the big white cloth. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, wow. Did you ever get the chance or come close to getting the chance to go and play in like a Europe or an England, for example?
Not really. No, I you have your agents along the way that you have a conversation with, and there might be interest, but there was nothing solid on the table, and that was really a key decision for me when you're going through that process at 23, 24, where you're like, right, like this is a really important next step for me, that I choose the right step. If I decide to go to Dubai, obviously you can go there and absolutely kill it, right? And then all of a sudden trajectory changes, because going back to that point, as we were coming through, you kind of chose at that time. You kind of went, China, Japan, Korea, Dubai, or you went Belgium, Denmark, if you were at the level that I was at. But like I was saying, I was very fortunate that I played that position, that a lot of centre halves before me were kind of just killing it in China, Japan, Korea. So I didn't really have anything solid on the table to go to Europe, but that was a very, very conscious decision at like 24. I was like, I don't want to stay in Australia for the next 10 years. I want to go on a bit of a journey before I start to settle down, have family, have kids. I want to go on that journey. I want to experience what it was like, and I guess that kind of takes us to the next step, which was Malaysia. And once I went from Dubai to Malaysia, and a lot of people were like, "Where'd that come from?" Like, it seems a bit strange, but Malaysia was the best years of my career, because I was literally playing in front of 45,000 every week.
Wow. Jesus,
I got to games 3.5 hours before games. This is the thing that Aussies have no idea about, right? And they almost disrespect the region, which is crazy for me because I lived there for so long. But literally would go 3.5 hours before games because I couldn't get to the stadium. I lived 5 minutes from the stadium. So that was the closest thing I got to playing like European football, you know? Like playing in front of 45,000 every week. And if you lost, you actually felt it because I wouldn't want to go to a shopping centre. I wouldn't want to go down to my local coffee shop and because you'd just be sitting out there. Big white guy.
Well, you've got no chance.
Exactly.
You've got the big sunnies and the moustache.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Because that's crazy that are bigger than some Premier League games. In fact, probably more than half of Premier League games.
It's funny you say that because obviously we play at Suncorp, right? 55,000.
Yeah.
We averaged 7,500 to 8,000 last year. You know, the nostalgic game which is on the wall behind you was the 55,000 orange Sunday when we beat the Mariners. However, when we average 8, people still say, yeah, Zac, you got disappointing crowds. I'm like, yeah, but in context, Luton Town, who's just been in the Premier League, kind of averaged 10,000. So we're not actually too far off what the Premier League clubs are at. It's just really that we play in a stadium that's just too big for us, right? So you lose that atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the atmosphere like in Malaysia in front of 45,000? Because I know that in England would be hostile.
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
This is the thing, like even, our owners who are based in Indonesia, their own Persija Jakarta. Kaz and I, our chairman, we went to Jakarta a couple of months ago and got taken to a game, and it was insane in terms of, you're talking 60, 70,000 people. We had to give the president a call when we arrived to make sure that we could get ushered through, just to make sure that we got to our seat and we found our seat. So, like, this is the thing that us Aussies, like, we just don't quite comprehend. It's kind of like, if you thought about it, it's like going to a Carlton-Collingwood game in Melbourne, right? That kind of 80, 90,000 at the G. Melbourne Victorians just love the AFL, right? So it's the same, going to Malaysia, playing in Malaysia, getting a message, getting the run sheet through and saying, I'll be at the game at 12 o'clock and it's a 3 o'clock kickoff. And thinking, 3 hours before, what am I going to do for 3 hours? But then you get in the car and you're like, okay, I need to get to the stadium as soon as possible.
That's mental. At what point did you start to go, okay, I'm a decent footballer, I'm a good footballer here, I'm playing in front of 40,000 people. What about after football? When am I going to start thinking about a long-term future? Was that then, or were you still in the thick of it thinking this is great and will last forever?
It happened pretty quickly for me. And I think it was probably because, if I'm honest, I knew quite young that I probably wasn't going to reach my full potential or where I wanted to get as a footballer. So
why was that?
It was probably just being around others, playing next to Trent Sainsbury, who went from Mariners to Holland to then play at the Asian Cup and win. And I literally was playing alongside this guy going, this guy's phenomenal.
He's better than me.
He's just so good, right? Yeah. He's so quick. He sees the game so much quicker than me. I do some things okay, and that's the reason why I'm here, and I believe in myself. But, okay, I'm probably not going to have a 10, 12, 13-year career where I can put the feet up at the end. So, I probably started to think about it pretty early, maybe 25, 26, when I set up my first investment company, Samara Capital, with a couple of investment bankers out of Singapore. And that was really the reason why I moved from Malaysia to Singapore, was because I was traveling so much. I was in Malaysia for 3 years, and I was traveling so much between Malaysia and Singapore. And I just got this real interest of developing companies. And there's just like this strong correlation, there's a synergistic relationship between like sport and business, where you just get this like overall sense that it's very similar in a lot of ways, in the way that you can kind of bring things across. And so I just started to invest in SMEs and just started to get in and work with founders. And it was almost like I was in a change room again with people who are ambitious, people who wanted to make something of themselves. And I was very fortunate that I had an eye for the right founders that kind of had a driving ambition to be something. And so I would just find those and similar to the business that you guys are in recruiting, just get to know the people, get to know their story and get to understand their background and what they wanted to achieve, and then really just place bets and then just try and help them kind of grow their own business. And that was what I did, kind of transition. That's how I transitioned out of football.
Hi, I'm Yas Madbouli, founder and CEO of Serving Our People. Serving Our People is a general charity. We're a delivery and logistics charity that has started in 2020 to help with the pandemic and the disasters across the country. We are helping very largely in food insecurity. We've got 3 people's markets to help people to come and get much needed goods when they need it. We operate in Southeast Queensland and Northern New South Wales, and we're expanding beyond. Please come and support us on sop.org.au and we're very thankful to be a partner with this amazing podcast.
Yeah, I was going to ask how you transitioned, and did you do any study? Because it sounds like you didn't have any business experience, and then all of a sudden you're going in to these founders and saying, hey, let me come and invest and grow your company. And they might be sitting back and going, well, where have you done it before, mate?
Yeah, I really struggled to study and play football when I was younger. I started a law degree straight out of school, and I did a year and a half, and I was just so dedicated to just try and get everything out of my football career that I could possibly get out of it. So when I moved from Gold Coast to Mariners, I just dropped my studies altogether. And even though I didn't want to, every time I was studying after training, I just felt like I should be in the gym, or I should be getting a massage, or I should be doing something to help I just felt like I was going backwards. And it was just an immaturity at the time, right? And as you get older, obviously you get more mature and you get to understand that you can do both, right? But at the back end of my football career, I started studying again. I did a Master's of Business Administration, and that was a beautiful segue for me, because I really started to understand myself and what my skill sets were and where my strengths lied. And I was never going to be the best lawyer, or was never going to be able to, someone that could, write the best, contract or read a P&L perfectly. But I had a broad, general understanding of how business worked, how to really bring a team together, understanding what drives people, get an understanding of how to kind of bring that environment to be as conducive as possible to have success. And so my early success moving out of football was really, like I said, identifying people that had those characteristics to be great, or had the understanding that actually it's about failing fast and learning from it. It's not always about being successful quickly. It's just about sometimes making as many mistakes as you possibly can and learning from them, and actually developing strength and character from those learnings. And so moving away from football, setting up Samara Capital, investing in Singaporean SMEs, then this thing called COVID hits, and everything kind of just goes back to kind of zero, and you kind of working again with founders, because you place all these big bets. I'm living in Singapore. I've moved my partner to Singapore. We're living there. I'm really enjoying this new kind of chapter in my life. And then you transition hits you, right? You realize that everyone now is facing a whole new reality, and that's the next test, the next kind of scar on the sleeve that you kind of got to work through.
Yeah. How did you deal with that?
Very similar to I guess the setbacks in football, and that was that commonality around what sport can do for you, and the resilience that it provides you. As a sportsman, you go through you have so many more losses than wins, right? You really build up this strong sense of resiliency and self-worth and self-character, and for me, I got to a point where nothing could really shake me, because I believed so much in the process. I knew that it was about patience and they were willing to keep going. At the end of the day, the one that just continues to fight and outwork everyone will be the one that wins. And I think that there's so many lessons that I took from sport, took from football, because I wasn't the best in the team. I was the one that sat on the bench. I was the one that had to encourage my teammates, because it is a team sport, right? So I was very much always a team player. I always knew that the success was never going to be down to me or the individual. It was always going to be down to the collective coming together and being as one. So I think that dealing with transitioning out of football at a really difficult time when the world economy shuts down, right? Yep. So you're trying to start a new business. You've invested a substantial amount of your own net worth in businesses that are now all shut down, and so now you've really got to go back to the first principles of business and get an understanding of, right, this is now a grind. Now this is a roll the sleeves up moment. This is something I've actually done before. It's just a different context, a different time.
I know from our business, we're trying to run it almost like a football club. We want everyone to be chipping in. We don't want it to be a massive hierarchy of us and them. It's a changing room environment where everyone's got their bit to pay. Yes, you take your natural roles, be in that changing room kind of as you would. It almost feels like a bit of a cheat code. Not everyone we're up against in businesses has the same sporting background that we've had. And I definitely feel like we've got a couple of legs up on them because of that. Would you say that's been the reason for your quick progression and success you've had in the corporate world?
I think that it's contextual, right? It depends on which industry you're in and what you're doing. I think that the industry that you guys are in, in regards to building a team, building an environment that is conducive to hard work. Because if you're working a 9 to 5 and you're trying to just work through the rungs and trying to promote your own career, then it may be a little bit different. But something like football, like our staff work 7 days a week, and it's so hard when I look at an employment contract and I see 38 hours. I'm like, and I've got plenty of people that come to our office and they're like, 38 hours? I'm like, yeah, it ain't gonna be 38 hours.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing about our staff is that there's a love for the brand and the journey that we're going on together, and everyone is bought into where we're going, and I think that's really important from a team environment. It's just like a change room. You've got to have this collective buy-in. Everyone's got to be on the same page of where we're going, and I think that from speaking to you both, that's what you've done really well, and this is something that we've started to build here since Kaz and I have come on board. Is that this is not a Zac and Kaz show. This is really about a men's team, a women's team, an academy team, an admin being together, and being able to really go on this journey together. And you know what? The work never stops. The work is always, there's always going to be something else. The goals and the milestones just continue to change. And I know that every 6 months, 12 months, we sit down and we see where we're at in terms of that progression. And sometimes it might feel like you go a few steps forward and then you go a few steps backwards. But for me, I'm much being footballers. It's so much better to do it with people than to try. And I look at individuals who do it. It's like probably like yourself being goalkeepers. They're just a completely different breed, right? Like you look at your Elon Musk's and your Bezos. Like okay, they've got big companies now with a lot of people, but it takes a special person to do that by yourself.
Yeah, I love the value that you put on resilience and how it translates into the business world, because I even think in our business, Harwell, there's times where you're working on a job, it's a hard job to fill, the client's being difficult, and there's been jobs in the past where Ads is probably sick of me whinging about it, but I'm just like, I can't walk away from it. And I'm like, nah, I'm going to go again, and just as you're about to walk away from it, that's where you get the success, 100%. And you go and fill it. And I just think so many people that might not have had that sporting background would just pack it in and walk away and never really unlock that full success.
I think so, yeah. It's so easy to take the easy option, right? And like you're so right, it always is that timing. As soon as you make the decision to go, nah, I'm going to stick it out, I'm going to do the hard thing, I'm going to do the thing that I'd rather not do. That's when the magic comes.
And it's all right if that's wrong as well. Like this is the thing, like it doesn't, you don't have to, this is the thing, like you may decide to keep going, and you know what, you might look back and go, I should have just packed it in 6 months ago, right? But I think that for me, it's actually about, for me, I've always spoken about this to our staff. It's actually, don't be afraid of failure. Just try things, because if you don't try, you'll never know if it actually could work or not. And at the end of the day, as long as you learn from experiences, and as long as you're seen to be proactive, we talk a lot here about not trying to always be reactive within business, because there's so much to do, right? Especially as guys who manage businesses, run businesses. You get pulled in a million different directions, but you've got to be really clear on your priorities and be really clear on what you're trying to achieve today. And then just try it and just work through and just make sure that you do things really well. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work, and then you just move on to the next thing. But I think that there's definitely something in that. I think that resilience is something that it's a behaviour it's ingrained and taught over time. It's not something you can just go and buy.
Yeah, that's it. One of our new Harwell values actually is a quote that Adam's claiming he made up of you win some, you learn some. I think he's going to get a tattoo of it somewhere as well.
One. If someone's listened to this, Zac, and I'm sure we've got hundreds of thousands of followers by now.
Number one podcast in the world.
For sure. And then they're in sport, or they've got that kind of sporting background. They're looking to crack into business or get that next career move. What are some key traits or some soft skills to develop, or tips and tricks to make that transition and be really good at it?
I think for me, there's one word that I've always stuck by, and that's reps. And this goes back to gym days. This goes back to training. For me, where I've seen success for myself is just consistency and that compounding effect, right? So I talk about reps, and I've literally written on my wall for a long period of time, that is just do the reps every day. And that might be cold calling. That might be reaching out to someone that you feel that can give you that little piece of wisdom, or introduce you to someone else. But for me, it's about just consistently doing the reps and not being afraid of continually doing the reps. And you may not feel that the reps are working. It's just like going to the gym and doing bicep curls for a month. You may not see the results after a month, but I'm guarantee if you keep doing that for 6 months, you're going to see some result, right? So for me, it's just, I know that I have a look at anyone in the eye and they say, how have you gotten to this position now to be running Brisbane Roar? It's purely work ethic. I will outwork anyone. and it's just coming back to my deep desire to help the brand. It comes from no ego. It comes from no real sense of entitlement of the position that I'm in. I have a huge responsibility to this brand and to our supporter base to get our football club back to where we know it should be. And it comes from a deep passion of wanting to help this community and help this football club. So I think that when we think about the journey that you go on, you just write chapters. You write chapters in your own book, and you just want to be able to look back on your own book and go, I gave it a crack. There was some learnings along the way, but for me, when I sit around and have a conversation, if it's a podcast, a coffee, a beer, I actually want to hear where did you fail? What did you learn? Instead of just telling me when you went, you had all this success and you made all this money and you went on these great trips. Well, actually tell me about when you failed, because I think there's more learning in that than anything else.
Yeah. What would you say has been your biggest failure in that journey?
2 parts. First part, probably listening to the wrong people when I was coming through in football. And when I say that, and I can relate to young players coming through now, because there's so many voices, even in business. Like, you guys get told all the time how to do your job. Everyone will be like, oh, you should be doing this and you should be doing that. As young administrators, we get it all the time. Everyone knows better. So I think that coming through as a 23, 24-year-old, just listening to the wrong advice, and I think that probably held me back a little bit in my own career. And then the next step was probably going into business, just probably being a little bit too naive. And probably that lack of experience. Probably thinking at the time I knew a little bit more than probably what I did, and probably again understanding the art of patience and understanding that it's a marathon, right? And just going through that process of let's just learn and develop, and let's go through the reps, and let's get that compounding effect to start to eventuate into wins. And I think that I've started to reap the rewards of that story.
That's incredible. How did so if you're a football person, you're from Queensland, probably the job that you and Kaz have got is probably the best job in the world, right? How did this come around?
This job right now, it was it was one of those opportunities that got presented. I was living in Singapore at the time. Kaz and I had been doing some work in Singapore. Kaz had been running his law firm. I was running Samara Capital, and we always would have the conversation around one day running a football club. The bigger ambition has always been to own our own assets. We were at the time in Singapore helping a lot of high net worths look at acquisitions throughout distressed acquisitions throughout Europe, because we saw a real interesting opportunity during COVID to take advantage of some distressed assets because of where the cost of capital was at. And so through those conversations and those networks, and the beautiful thing about Singapore, Dubai, is that everyone's connected in some way. We just ended up helping the right people, and eventually led to a conversation with the now directors of Cronus Capital, who own our football club. And we got approached about this opportunity and the distressed nature that this business was in, and it was in a distressed nature. Like when I first arrived, I really didn't know if we could make payroll, and payroll was like 2 days away, right? Sure. So, Kaz and I walked into a fire with a lot of skeletons, but it was also the reason why we got an opportunity as young entrepreneurial administrators who loved the game, wanted to see and do it our way. We saw this as a huge opportunity, and we get asked all the time, like, guys, like, you could be doing so many other things. Like, why are you putting yourself through this? But like you said, this is, for us, the best job in the world, because we get to make a huge difference, and we get to do something that we deeply care about. But yeah, after meeting the directors, sitting down and formulating a real clear business strategy and a vision for this football club, we got given the green light, and we literally, from that moment, got on a plane from Jakarta back to Brisbane, and I started before my first day. I just got on the tools, rolled the sleeves up, and from that moment, I've just done whatever it's taken to get us to a point today where we're starting to get some foundation and back to square one. But like I said, the work never stops, and there's so much to do.
I want to speak about the current state and what's the future, but first I want to ask about your relationship with Kaz. And the reason I ask that is me and Harvey seem quite similar. We've known each other since we were 14.
Yeah, brilliant.
We know each other inside out. I mean, you also know our personality types as well.
Yeah.
Who's better suited to what job. He's better at the more detail orientated, slower process.
Yeah.
If there's quick decisions to make, where the consequence or the impact doesn't really make a difference either way, bang, 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 that's me. What's the dynamic between yourself and Kaz?
Well, yeah, Kaz and I have known each other probably 10 years or 12 years. We first came across each other in the league. So
Nice.
it's a pretty cool story. As young administrators, I think the youngest in the league, we've gone on our own journeys. Kaz finished a lot younger than myself. He's, touted the next big thing, signing at Benfica. Anyone that knows football knows that, they don't sign, talent if you're not good enough. Like it's a production factory, Benfica. So I've kind of was just following Kaz's career as another young footballer, as you do. And then we linked back up in Singapore, and like yourselves, we just had a bit of a synergy in the way that we thought, the way that we worked. And I think that with business partners, or when you go into business, for me, there's a few things that have to align. And the first one's trust. You've got to have a really strong trust that you back each other, even if there's decisions that you may not agree with, that you have those conversations in private, and you have the ability to really back each other in decisions. And then for me, the next one's work ethic. It's very difficult to work with someone that, you're working, say 20-hour days and your mate's working 5. Like it's never going to work. So Kaz for me has always been someone that's inspired me with his work ethic. He's always, had my back in difficult moments. And he's someone that's just hyper intelligent and knows, so much about the game and I guess the business side of sport, and we just align on so many things. But like any business, you've got to have the yin and yang. You've got to understand, like you said, the different personality types. And I guess you may say different.
Yeah, sure.
I'm more of the emotional kind of softer side, where Kaz is a little bit more black and white in terms of his approach. But it works, right? And I think that I think we've seen it with coaches. You've got to have good cop, bad cop, and
So wait, just to be clear, right? You're saying he's the bad cop.
I'm the bad cop. No, definitely the good cop.
That trust piece is huge, isn't it?
It's so important. Yeah, it's probably the most important thing, and that's why a lot of businesses fall over, because there's jealousy at every level. There's and the story behind Kaz getting his role was that when I got approached by the directors, I got approached to become the CEO of Brisbane Roar. And at the time, I said to the directors of Cronus, I think there's someone way better than me for this role. Let me introduce you. If you disagree, no problems at all, but I think you should meet this guy. And so Kaz went on his journey with the directors, and then he hired me. So
that's really interesting.
That's really, I didn't hold a gun to his head. He literally said, like, if this is the right thing for you, please. But I think that trust is, if you don't have that between a management team, I think you've got to be able to have robust conversation. You can't be yes men. You've got to be able to challenge each other. But if you don't have trust, then it's just all going to fall over.
Can you build that without using the seat? Because I know people I speak to now who go, "Oh, it'd be so good to have a Harvey if I'm going to start a business." But you can't just go and find someone. They've kind of got to come into your life in a different way, and you've got to build up that relationship without the pressure of, "I want to start a business with you."
Yeah.
So can you do that with someone? Could you go out on the street now and go, "I want to start a business. I'm going to find the person to build it with"?
I think again, I would, from my experiences, I've done it a number of different ways, right? So I've gone into an environment where I've gone, you know what, I've always wanted to be around smarter people. I hate being in a room where I feel like I know more than most.
Oh, you're fucked here then, mate.
You guys know so much more than me. But I really enjoy like going into an environment where you're just learning all the time, right? So, and it doesn't have to be intellectual things. It can be soft skills. It can be whatever, right? But my issues in the past have been, you go into an environment like, say like a finance side, and you're looking at top investment bankers, and you start to understand that they are operating at a whole nother level. However, can you spend 20 hours a day with these people? And it's like very quickly you might be able to do it for a week, but it gets to a point where you're like, nah, this is probably not what I can do for the rest of this year, let alone my life, right? So I think there's got to be some softness and some fun to it. You've got to be able to, enjoy each other's company. You've got to be able to not necessarily, do everything together, but you work long hours. You work, you guys work long hours. You do a lot of work together. Doesn't mean you've got to be playing football and doing everything together. But I feel like you've got to have a relationship that's aside from the professional side. You've got to have some personal relationship where you enjoy each other's company, where you can go like, tell me about you, tell me about your partner, tell me about your mum and dad. Like, I want to know a bit about you rather than strictly just professional all the time.
Yeah, that's it. Like I reckon I spend more time with ads than I spend with my missus.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I love, obviously the trust is massive. And one thing we probably underestimated in our relationship, and it's probably something that we've always done because we're in a professional background with the football, but you don't have to sugarcoat things. Like if something's not right or something needs to be done, we can just tell each other. So there's never that kind of middle ground or that grey zone of what's going on here. It's just always straight down the line. Here's the problem, let's deal with it, move on. It just doesn't snowball.
There's no time for it, right? It's like you guys come from a recruitment background, you know, like we were saying before, when I think about recruiting good people, if it's not going to work, just cut it off real quickly. It's best for you and it's best for them. You don't want things to drag on if it's not right. And I think that with business, sometimes it can drag on because it feels like, oh, we've sunk 50K in each to this business. Like, you know, we've got to try and make it work. It's, you know what, we're actually better just losing that 10K, paying each other back the 40 and just going our separate ways, right? So I think that there's so much complexity to it. Like you're very, very fortunate. It's like your partner. When you find a really good person to spend the rest of your life with, like there's nothing more important than that. It's the same in business. If you find someone that you get along with in business, like it's just as important, right? It's so hard to find those people, and that's why so many founders kind of try to do it themselves. You know, it's very hard to find it'd
be a lonely place.
I couldn't do it.
Can you imagine doing it by yourself? Like, you know what I mean? I look at this journey and then like the amount of work that is required. I'm like, if I didn't have Kaz or someone that was along the journey with me, and also like actually understanding the amount of work you put in, you know, and actually being able to like, can I just debrief for a minute? Like, can I decompress and just tell you, like, I've had a really shit day, like, and just to be able to get off your chest so that you don't take that home and all the rest of it, right?
Yeah, that's it. What does a current week look like for you? Obviously, you've told us there's been a big journey where you came in, it was in a bit of a mess, and you've turned it around. But where are you at now with the role?
So my role as Chief Operating Officer is mainly based around and focused upon the operations of the business and kind of allowing Kaz to think more strategically about where the club's going and sit mainly at a board level and be, you know, communicating regularly with league. So I allow him to focus more headspace there, and I kind of sit in the micro of the business. So I kind of sit, you know, across marketing, across commercial, but my main focus and really my area of expertise is on the sporting side. So I look at you know, how we can get that pathway right, you know, from NPL clubs, you know, through to the professional game. How can we give more boys and girls an opportunity at the elite level? I look at, you know, how we can improve our talent ID, how, you know, who are we missing in Queensland? You know, how do we, you know, go and source the best players from interstate if they're not getting those opportunities? So my week kind of, you know, goes from, you know, like a 9 o'clock Monday staff meeting where I allow everyone in the room to kind of have a debrief and give me feedback on where they're at within their own vertical, to, you know, going and raising, you know, sponsorship, to going to the training ground. I was at the training ground this morning meeting with Jay O'Shea and Jack Hingett, getting feedback from the players on how they're feeling. What's the environment like? Are they enjoying training? Is there something that we can improve? To then, you know, leaving, coming back and having a look at some new offices potentially, to going and seeing our major partners in the city, Outcast, who are a commercial outfitter, sitting down with the guys and just, you know, debriefing on what we can do together to kind of help them grow their business. You know, coming back to the office and touching base with our content team and saying, right, are we doing a podcast this week? You know, how are we getting out in our community? You know, are our players going to schools this week? Are they going to clubs? Like, so I'm very much in the micro. I'm very much not sitting above. Like you guys, we're very flat here. You know, there's access, but I need to be in the micro right now because there's just so much to do.
Yeah. How many hours a week are you punching out?
I don't know, honestly. No, it gets to a point where, like, it's literally not a job. Like, I literally...
Yeah, I love that.
For me, and this is a Dana White, like, quote, right? Like, if you're not waking up every day and literally, like, jumping out of bed, you're doing the wrong thing. And for me, like, I'm up every day, 4:10. I'm in the gym at 5. I come back, I see my missus, we have a coffee, I drop her to work. I'm in here 8:30, and I'm here until work literally drags me out to go and see her again, have dinner, get to sleep, and then I start again. And it's just something that's been built into me over years, and I love doing what I do. So I think for me, hours, if I had more hours in a day, I would literally be happy just to keep doing what I'm doing.
I love that. You can feel, this is Friday afternoon, by the way, we're filming this. You can feel the energy you've got.
I did offer you a Red Bull. I did have a coffee, but,
no, but the energy you've got, mate, like, it's been obviously a big week for everyone, right? But you still sat here delivering these words with so much passion and energy behind it, which is only genuine. How do you feel about saying your job's your identity? Because I know for us it's our business, but I am literally Hartwell. That is me. There's no separation. There's no Adam and then there's work Adam. It's all just blends into one, which I'm sure can frustrate the missus. But I think you've got to be that obsessed with it if you want to achieve the kind of results that we're here to set out for.
It's the Conor McGregor, right? You got to be obsessed with what you do. You got to be obsessed with, and the interesting thing is deciphering passion from professional, and I think it can get mixed. But for me personally, I remember having our first meeting, Kaz and I, with our players. I walked into a room where I look at Jack Hingett and I was at his wedding probably 2 months before. I look at Matt Acton. Matt Acton's mum looked after me when I was 17 for a year because I didn't have anywhere to go, right? I'm in a room with my generation. And I literally looked at the men in the room and said, guys, I am not going to change who I am. Just so you know, that's one of my best mates. I grew up with him. His mum took me in when I was 17. I am who I am. At the end of the day, you may not like all the decisions that we make, but I will be who I am. And I think that's really important with whatever you do, that you don't try and become someone else but just because you've got an important responsibility to a brand or to an organisation or to a supporter base. I think that it's really important that authenticity can get lost a lot. And I think that what you're mentioning about your brand, if you can harness that, it just takes you to a whole nother level of respectability and kind of confidence to know who you are. And I think it will take your brand to a whole nother level.
Yeah, that piece you said about putting yourself on the level with the guys, that's huge, and that's what we try to do with our team, to the point where sometimes when they call me boss, I actually cringe a little bit. I'm just like, oh no, don't see yourself as a boss. And I think people are changing and the world's changing where it's no longer the old school dictator. This is the way it's being done. It is more that collaborative approach. So it's cool that you've been able to implement that in a football club, because I think football's probably one of the industries where it is at times still a little bit more old school. I like it.
I still call our coach Gaffer. Our coach come in, and I just, it's natural to me. Ruben, who's another young man, in his second kind of professional gig. When I see him, I still will call him Gaffer, and it's just I kind of like that respect. And I think that for you, it's probably your colleagues showing you a level of respect. And even though you may not like it, I remember being 15, 16, I'd call my coach boss, but it was just something that it was almost like I was teaching myself that, I don't know, it was maybe it was something that I actually quite enjoyed in terms of I'm following you. You're my leader. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to follow you. I respect you. Okay, the word is a word, and you may not like it, but I actually like it.
I've never thought about it like that. It's quite nice to hear that, actually, mate. That's good.
So where's the club at now, mate? What's some of the challenges for this season? What are we looking at to do? What do you want to achieve?
We're entering a very interesting time. When Kaz and I came on board 12 months ago, literally to the day, we were taking over a club with significant debt, a club with no real DNA, no real vision, a disgruntled fan base that just wanted to feel connected again. So we've worked, night and day to connect the brand back with community. We've worked really hard to clear the skeletons. Worked really hard, as you both know, in business to get the financials right. And like with life, recently we've been hit with another big material cut from the league, which is really materially going to hurt us in the short term, because you make so much progress, you set new goals, new milestones, and then you kind of get a call to say, well, that distribution that you were getting last year, and moving forward, it's going to be cut by 78%. Well, okay, that's a kind of swallow, your saliva moment where you go, right, okay, let's rethink this. It's another hurdle to jump through, but we'll be okay. I think that the most important thing about any football club is its players and its supporter base. If you don't have fans, if you don't have a supporter base, you don't have a football club. So Kaz and I, being football people, just care so deeply about our players, our staff, our supporter base, our members, and that's every decision that we make. If it's not for the members and it's not for our players and our staff, then we don't make it. So I think that we've made some huge progress over the last 12 months. We've gone and cleaned up a lot of legacy, but there's a long way to go. And I think that for Kaz and I, the way that we become sustainable as an organisation is that we've got to move away from relying on the league, relying on TV and TV broadcasting income, and start to really rely and focus on external commercial revenue streams that can fund the deficit of the hole that our current shareholder has to fill every year. And as you both know as founders, it's never nice to be sitting in a deficit and pulling money out of your own pockets to fund a business. And our shareholders have been doing that for 10 years, right? So they're incredible people. And, you know, as over the last 12 months, getting to know our shareholders and our principals, they're such a sophisticated and you know, incredibly smart operating people, but they're just desperate for us now to get a model that can become sustainable. And I think that being football people, you've seen it, right? There's the story today about Bordeaux going into administration. It's not something that's new to football, but for Kaz and I, being young administrators, it's something that it's our key focus is for this club to become sustainable on its own feet without having to put our hand out to the shareholder every year.
Yeah, that's one thing that shocked me most about when I came over and started playing football in Australia. I think they probably do at NPL level now, but people don't charge fans to watch games. And I started asking questions like, how are these clubs running sustainably? Yeah. And to find out, normally it's a couple of guys that have started the club just tipping money in. You just think, how is that sustainable long term? And we're talking about now building a football pyramid where you can provide pathways through to potentially a national second tier. Until something changes there in the way that clubs are sustainable with running themselves, I just can't see it happening.
Yeah, the problem with this football club over the last 10 years since our shareholder took over was that, and especially after the last 3 since the unbundling from Football Australia, is that the model has purely been reliant on franchise value going up and TV broadcasting money going up. So if you find yourself in a position like we're in right now where the league metrics haven't hit the KPIs, right? Then you start to see your franchise value go down, your TV broadcast money go down, and that main vertical that the clubs rely on starts to dissipate, right? So now we find ourselves in a position after 12 months where we've just focused on cleaning up, you know, all the issues that we've had. We just haven't had enough time in the seat to start building upon the momentum. But the great thing, if you want to flip it and look at the positives, we are just forced now to go even harder. We are just forced now to go, you know what? Okay, that 2 or 3 year plan, we've got to go and make it 1 or 2 years for us to get to the next kind of goal, the next milestone. So Kaz and I now are looking at, you know, strategic acquisitions. We're looking at, you know, where can we develop? You know, what is the land? What do we do a medical site? Do we do a leagues club? You know, what are strategically the next step for our organisation so that our owners over the next 10 years can pull away the funding for this organisation and continue funding it to then generate more income that feeds back and helps the operations of the business.
You probably don't get told this as much as you should, because I think when you're at the top, it can be quite a lonely place. But mate, listen to you talk about the club as a whole and what you want to do. They are so lucky to have the both of you in the seat that you're in. And I think with the challenges you face, without someone who has a genuine care and passion for the area and for the club, they'd be in absolute strife, mate.
It could be very different, yeah, for sure. One thing we like to do at the end of each episode with our guest is, if you could go back to the start, day one, and give young Zac a golden piece of advice from everything you've learned on that journey, what would it be?
I honestly think it would just be fail fast.
Yeah.
Enjoy the journey. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. No one's perfect. Don't try and be perfect. Just fail fast, learn from the mistakes, and just keep going. And I think that I've only started to learn that maybe over the last couple of years as I've gotten in my 30s, and you start to get a little bit more mature about, you know what, you can fail and you can make mistakes and you can actually rise and learn a lot more from it. But I've learned so much more from my mistakes than my wins. And I think that if I could expedite anything, you know, over the last 20, 30 years, it would just be fail fast.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because that's a conversation we've had, especially in our industry, recruitment. It's always been quite old school, and we've come probably with quite a fresh approach that's out of the box at times. And when we're coming up with these crazy ideas, we're just thinking, do you know what? If it fails, who gives a fuck?
Yeah, 100%.
Like, we'll fail, we'll pack it away and move on to the next one. So that's great to hear that we're on the right track.
Well, mate, thanks so much for sharing a bit of time with us.
Guys.
I thoroughly enjoyed that, mate. I'm sure you did too.
Yeah, I'm keen to go and grab a beer, I think.
100%.
Happy days.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time.
Done.
Give me